Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And thank you, members, for all being in the chamber for these really important budget amendments. This amendment, and I want you to please listen carefully because I've put a lot of work into trying to fully fund these programs. This amendment provides $52 million in non-recurring funds from the general revenue to the Department of State for the Division of Cultural Affairs grants, and reduces funding by the same amount, of course, from Section 98 on page 407 in the back of the bill. But more specifically, this reduction comes from the State Transportation Trust Fund, which is a brand new $2 billion silo of extra funding from President Biden's American Rescue Package. Now, what does this $50 million transfer in my amendment actually fund? Well, here's what we have. It funds 3 Division of Cultural Affairs grant categories. First, $33,686,949 is appropriated for the Cultural and Museum Grants General Program Support Ranked List, which is referenced in your budget in specific appropriation 3107 on page 378. That's fully vetted grant applications to 515 mostly nonprofit groups across Florida. Next, what it funds is $14,757,394 appropriated to fund an additional 47 grant applications from the Cultural Facilities Program, referenced in appropriation 3112A on page 379 of the budget. And finally, members, $3.6 million is appropriated to fund an additional 15 arts and culture groups under the Cultural Endowment Program that was unfortunately left out of this year's budget. All told, members, that's $52,044,343 in additional funding distributed between 730 mostly nonprofit arts and culture organizations fully vetted by the Department of State. I know that's an intentionally precise to the dollar appropriation. When combined with the House's already generous allocation, thanks to Chair Williamson's support currently included in the GAA, this amendment will fully restore funding to this competitively evaluated state matching grant program for the first time since Governor Scott signed the 2014-15 budget. Members, that is the amendment.
Members, questions on the amendment? Questions on the amendment? Representative Nixon, questions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thanks, Representative Smith. Can you please tell me how exactly the Division of Cultural Affairs grants comes up with these 730 arts and cultural groups?
Representative Smith.
Thank you, Representative Nixon, for the question. I've gotten a lot of questions actually about this. So the 730 arts and culture organizations that have applied for grants, they are recommended by the Department of State, and they have actually already gone through, before we put this budget together, a rigorous vetting process by the Division of Cultural Affairs staff and by, frankly, hundreds of volunteer arts professionals in order to get eligibility. I want folks to understand, because this is important, these 730 groups, these are not member projects. The awardees, to your point on the question, Representative Nixon, these awardees have to provide quarterly and final reports accounting for all of the grant funds and the matching expenditures as well as program deliverables under the Department of State. But also the eligibility for future grants is dependent on completing these reports. So they're very compliant It's based on where they fall on the ranked list, and in the case that a grant category is not fully funded, which unfortunately is the case in this year's budget, which we're trying to fix, each applicant's grant amount is basically reduced by a score-based formula that proportionally distributes the allocation from the Florida legislature. So thank you for that question.
Representative Nixon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One more follow-up, Representative Smith. So are these groups and organizations, they're pretty much scattered across the state? Are they centralized in one location? Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Representative Smith.
Thank you for that, Representative Nixon. And yes, actually, these 730 arts and culture groups that are being funded with this amendment, they range from Panama City and Pensacola all the way across North Florida out to Jacksonville, Central Florida, Ocala, Tampa, all the way down certainly to Key West and Rep. Mooney's district. So these are very well represented all across the state. And if any members, certainly have any questions on whether any of these groups are based in their district that they represent, I have the full chart here of all the organizations who have applied for this important funding. So thank you.
Additional questions, members. Representative Escamani.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have one quick question for you, Representative Smith. Can you talk a little more about the economic impact of investing in arts and culture within our communities?
Representative Smith.
Thank you, Representative Escamani. So according actually to the state, because since this is a grant program that's been well established that we have actually, to our credit as a legislature, we've been funding for many years, the state has actually run reports to see are we getting what we paid for. And what they have found is that for every $1 that we invest in these Division of Cultural Affairs matching grant programs, every $1 we are getting $9 back into state and local government coffers, certainly in the form of tax revenue. So this is an investment 9-to-1. I think that you'd be hard pressed to be able to match anywhere in the $98 billion budget before you.
Additional questions, members? Additional questions? Seeing none, are there amendments to the amendment?
None on the desk, Mr. Speaker.
Are there substitute amendments?
None on the desk, Mr. Speaker.
Members, we're in debate. Members wish to be recognized in debate. Representative Escamani.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to thank Representative Smith for this awesome amendment. I also did want to thank Chair Williamson, because I do think at the very least keeping arts and culture funding to its current funding level is a really important step. So I just want to say thank you for that, and I do appreciate you, and I see you for it. But of course, trying to find ways to fully fund all these programs is so impactful. Members, in my district, we're home to the Arts and Culture District in Central Florida. We have Lock Haven Park, we have some of the larger venues like Dr. Phillips, and we have the pop-ups across the area. And if it wasn't for high school theater, I would not be here, and I would not be who I am today, which maybe some of y'all regret. But high school theater was super transformational for me, because my mom passed away when I was 13 years old, and if it wasn't for high school theater and having access to the arts at a young age, I definitely think I would not have been as focused in school. I would not have graduated high school and gone on to college. And so having better access to arts and culture is super important, and I just want to say thank you for this amendment to find a way to fully fund these programs and give all of our nonprofits a chance to benefit from this really important program. Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, please support this very, very good amendment from Representative Smith. Last month, I spoke to a group of young people, and I challenged them to name 10 African Americans who made significant contributions in this state and in this country. And they gave me a lot of names, but none of them were Floridians. I challenge young people to do the same thing for women. Just 10, name them in terms of the women who have made contributions to the state of Florida. And they were challenged to do that. Now, the problem is that we have not elevated our culture, our heritage, our history here in the state of Florida. And the young people could not give me 10 names because you can't tell a story that you don't know. You can't tell the story if you don't know the story. So this very good amendment would support culture, it would support art, it would support historic preservation here in the state of Florida. I am the founder of the Wells-Built Museum of African American History and Culture in Orlando, Florida. The museum is located in a building that opened in 1929 and was listed in the Negro Motorist Green Book. And if you're not familiar with what the Negro Motorist Green Book was, it was a directory compiled by a black postal worker in Harlem. And using his network of Negro postal workers, he was able to identify by state and by city places where African Americans would be welcome and safe during the days of segregation. That book published from 1936 until 1966, and the Wells-Built was listed in the Negro Motorist Green Book and was slated for demolition. And through the Division of Historic Preservations here in the state of Florida, it is now listed on the National Register of Historic Places because of the historically significant people who lived there, such as Thurgood Marshall, Jackie Robinson, Ella Fitzgerald, etc. You can't tell the story if you don't know the story. And so this very good amendment would provide funding so that we can elevate our culture, elevate our heritage, elevate our history, and preserve some of the sites like the ones that I just shared with you. So I ask you today to support Representative Smith's amendment, which would fully fund all of the organizations that have been vetted to receive funds through the arts and cultural system here in the state of Florida. And we've made progress, but we still have a way to go. So please vote up on this very good amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Geller, we are out of time. If you'd like to make some brief comments, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate that. I'll be very quick. Members, this is about jobs. This is about tourism. This is about industry. We need to rebuild our tourist industry. And when people come someplace, they don't want to just go to the beach. They want to see something. They want to go to a museum, see a place, see a show. This is a good thing for our tourism industry. It's a good thing for jobs in Florida. Please vote for it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the courtesy.
Yes, sir. Representative Smith, you recognize to close.
Thank you, Speaker Sprowls. Members, think about this phrase for a minute. First to close, last to reopen. Regardless of what state you live in, members, no matter how your governor, how your city mayor responded to the COVID pandemic, first to close, last to reopen has been the reality for arts and culture groups all across America. Even in Florida, we know all industries have been hit hard, but members, most small businesses are not dependent on the diverse private and public funding partnerships in addition to their own robust sales and revenue in order to stay afloat, like our arts, history, and cultural-based organizations are. But members, our support here isn't just for the sustainability of these groups. It's a great investment. As I mentioned before, a detailed analysis of the Department of State's Arts and Culture Grant Program found that we received $9 back for every $1 that we invested in these arts and culture programs. Even last year's investment, at half of the level my amendment invests in, allowed for these groups to leverage $150 million in matching funds and served an audience of 30 million people in Florida. That is a great rate of return, and it's not hard to see why, because members, arts and culture and history is a $4.7 billion industry in Florida. It's 58,162 arts-related businesses. They employ 227,000 people, and support for their production, distribution, and infrastructure has been critical to our success as a state, not only in tourism, but in attracting businesses and economic development and for Floridians' quality of life. But then COVID hit. COVID hit, and arts and culture businesses were first to close, last to reopen. That's local theater companies, our stages, concert halls, ballets, and unfortunately for just under 1,500 of those Florida-based arts and culture groups, this amendment is trying to save, ones like this amendment is trying to save, they saw $224 million in COVID-related losses and expenses. 20,000 Florida arts workers saw their jobs terminated, furloughed, or eliminated. Members, with your favorable support, I know that's duplicative, Chair Burton, with your bipartisan support, we can lift up 730 arts and culture organizations, lift all boats. Many of them are in your districts, and they're already vetted and approved for this funding, made possible, of course, by President Biden's American Rescue Package. So members, while they may have been first to close and last to reopen, our support will ensure that these concert halls, live performance venues, and museum exhibits actually blow the doors back open. And members, I want you to understand that this amendment, which of course is part of the legislative process, this amendment is not a criticism of Speaker Sproul's budget. It is not a criticism of Chair Williamson and others' work on this budget. What this amendment is it is a celebration of arts and culture programs in the state of Florida. The show must go on, and that is why I ask for your bipartisan support on this very important amendment. Thank you, members.
Members, Representative Smith having closed on his amendment, all in favor of adoption of the amendment say yay. Yay! All opposed, no? No. Show the amendment fails. Seeing 5 hands, the clerk will unlock the machine and the clerk will proceed to vote. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? The clerk will lock the machine. Record the vote.
44 yeas, 74 nays, Mr. Speaker.
Amendment fails. Read the next amendment.